The Amazing Digital Circus finale finally dropped on YouTube, and it's a lot. I do not think any of us really knew what to expect going into this last episode, and honestly, it was definitely different than what I expected. There's a lot of things that happened and a lot of character conclusions and even emotional beats, not gonna lie. I might have teared up a little bit, but there's one specific thing that's been dominating the conversation on the internet since the episode dropped, and that is Jax. Specifically, their interpretation that Jax is transgender. Gooseworks, the creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, has confirmed it herself. But the way it was handled in the show, the context to the creator as well, and the broader conversation about representation all deserve a good, real discussion. The finale, named Remembered, was dropped on premiere last Friday, and I think it's fair to say there were a lot of things that felt just very odd to the community. First, the main reveal and the pinpoint of the whole story, the characters being digital copies of themselves. Kinga just dropped it as a most random thing right at the start, that the characters were trapped in the circus aren't the actual original humans. That's a reveal. All 3 years of the story building up, revealed right at the start with no build up, no anything like that, just dropped there. And while it's a fascinating concept, and honestly I feel like a lot of people already kind of picked up on it already, it just felt off. It felt like this type of information could be led from some emotional build up or something like that, but in the end it didn't feel like it earned the weight of that reveal at all. Jax's abstraction, which is probably the biggest part of this whole thing. Jax abstracts off screen. We're literally just being shown different clips of them trying to rebuild the circus together, and then the next clip is literally just Jax running around the circus abstracted. One moment he's there and then he's gone. That's it. Bye-bye. For a character that's been so central, especially by the end of the story, to have his breaking point happen off screen just felt off, disorienting, and not in a good way. However, that is something that I do want to get back on later in the video. Overall, the pacing itself just felt rushed. Yes, it was an hour, which is the longest an episode has ever been, but it just felt like they were trying to cram so many things into one. I really wish, and I feel like the Amazing Digital Circus is one of those series that could have actually been really good and would have really benefited from filler episodes. And because we didn't have that, and especially with everything that was revealed, if there was just more information on them, I just feel like everything could have flowed so much better and the finale would have really had such a better impact. So the question becomes, is this great writing under impossible constraints, maybe from the studio itself or maybe from the creator itself, God knows? Or was it forced? And honestly, I think it's a mix of both. The ideas are there, the emotional core is there, but the execution suffers from a pacing problem that the show never quite managed to fix. Now, let's talk about Jax specifically, and why the Jax interpretation, even if it's confirmed by the creator, feels like it came out of nowhere for a lot of people. There's a lot of things to unpack here. Firstly, Gooseworks herself has acknowledged that the original 4 episodes of the show had things that could have been done even better. And I think that's actually a very important context here. The show was still finding its footing, and not every clue or piece of foreshadowing was placed as carefully as it could have been. When you're building towards a reveal that's this significant, you do need solid foundation. And especially when the whole show had a total of 9 episodes, 9 being the last one, it does really bring into context the possibilities of why the reveal just felt so off. But there were still clues there. Clue 1 from the episode 4, Jax and the dress. I think we all remember that specific point in the episode where Zubul creates a poll and then everyone votes on Jax wearing a maid dress. And a lot of people also, they believe that this was a hint, but honestly, in my opinion, when I saw it, it read more as a commentary to his toxic masculinity. We already had some information on Jax, we're already seeing how Jax behaves and interacts with other people and how he might also think about himself to an extent. And I feel like the joke was meant to be that Jax, this hyper-aggressive, macho character, was uncomfortable with femininity. If anything, that scene felt like it was showing us how deeply he's buried with any connection to his femininity, not a hint at his true identity. The second clue, Jan's skins of nightmare in episode 8. This happened when Kane got really mad at the characters and just put themselves in their own personal nightmare based on what Kane actually knows about the characters. In Jax's worst nightmare scene, Shadows literally rip his skin off. It is a powerful visual, and I can see why many people connected to being trans. The idea of shedding a false exterior to reveal your true self. But again, in context. This felt more like he was an obvious persona scene, especially when he's talked about himself in the previous episodes, him being the funny persona, the fear of people seeing who he really is underneath the jokes about the cruelty. That's a universal theme, and it works for a trans reading indeed, but it also works for anyone who's ever worn a mask to protect themselves. The third clue, and I think the most obvious one, the Ribbit and Jax scene at the end of episode 9. This is the scene where I have to say is definitely the most telling. The flashbacks with Ribbit, their friendship, everything kind of pinpointed to this conversation of Ribbit and Jax in their room where they start opening up to each other. And this is where the trans reading gets really stronger support. Ribbit was someone Jax trusted, and he finally opened up, and when he did, he pushed her away. He lost the one person who might have understood him. But here's the problem. This scene happens right at the end of the finale. There's barely anything addressing Jax's internal struggle before the moment. So even though it's personally powerful, it feels random. Like the show is telling us something important about Jax, but it waited until the last possible second to do it. And yes, a lot of people have pointed out more clues that foreshadow Jax being transgender. The constant Zubul and Jax interactions that felt intentional, almost like mirroring one another when Zupa is the only other non-binary character in the whole series. The song in the finale, Isn't She Lovely, that is literally talking about transgender girl. Even Jax's pink and blue room. And all of those are valid observations. The issue is that because of the lack of time, the lack of episodes, the amount of characters that were portrayed, there was no time to actually digest any of this. And the clues were so hidden that it was just not enough for most people to understand what was being set up. So the core problem is that yes, there were some clues, they were just very subtle, to the point of being invisible to most viewers. When the big reveal came right at the end with minimal foreshadowing, it does feel unearned, and I do completely understand that perspective. Not because the content isn't meaningful, but because the storytelling didn't give us enough time to sit with it, to process it, and to see it come. Now, I want to talk about Goosework, the creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, because I think understanding who made this show and the context around them is essential to this conversation. Goosework is a trans woman herself, who immediately adds layers to the Jax's conversation, but she's also someone with a complicated online presence. She has a history of tweets that, let's just say, they were very interesting. I'm not here to cancel anyone. Honestly, when I was reading for this whole video, I do generally think she's like a whole vibe. But it's important to acknowledge the person behind the story is a complex individual, their own baggage, and that does affect how we receive her work. Here's also something that people didn't realize. While Gooseworks confirmed herself on her personal blue space that Jax is trans, Glitch Production, the animation company that produced the show, never made an official statement. There's literally nothing about it online. This does create an awkward gap, and I do understand why people also feel like this is very off. The creator says one thing, but a company that literally animated it and made it a thing for us to see stays silent. It's also worth noting that Gooseworks started off incredibly excited about the Amazing Digital Circus, but over time that changed. And that was also due to the fandom themselves. She became overwhelmed and exhausted by the fandom's intensity. The constant scrutiny, drama, demands, it definitely took a toll. She made posts indicating she's tired of it and wants to move on, and even bashing the fandom themselves about just being too much. And honestly, I really don't blame her. No creator signs up for this amount of toxicity that some fandoms can produce, and unfortunately the way that Amazing Digital Circus was written, they target an audience that definitely was on the side of intense. Given all of this, I think it's wise to take any creative statement with a grain of salt. I'm not saying to dismiss it, but to approach it with a nuance. Also, let's not forget about the huge tweet thread that she had last year, where she basically started saying random things about Jax themselves in Amazing Digital Circus, where it just confused people even more. Creators are human, they change their minds, they say things with the heat of the moment, they interpret their work differently at different times, just as us. That doesn't make them wrong. It just doesn't mean that we should treat everything as gospel. And also, something that fans really picked on is that Goosework herself said that Jax is their favorite character. And because of that, a lot of fans have called Jax a self-insert. And I think you can take it two ways. The positive reading, when an artist wants the story to be heard. They use their art to reach people who might be going through similar situations. And since Goosework is trans herself, she created a trans character who struggles with their identity, masking, and self-acceptance. That's not self-indulgent. That's vulnerable. That's brave. That's an artist saying, I see you, and I want you to know you're not alone. And I do think that's beautiful. But you can also take it more critically, where a creator making their favorite character self-insert can feel self-indulgent, especially when the character gets a disproportionate amount of focus, especially by the end of the series. The story felt polarized over others, and when the creator's personal connection to the character starts to feel like it's driving the narrative more than the story itself, I do see why people think it's wrong. I don't think either reading is wrong. Again, I think both can be true at the same time, and I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Alright, this is the section I really want you to pay attention on, because I do think it's very important. And it might be a hot take, but I do genuinely believe it. Here's the thing. Representation in the media has often been treated as the sacred thing. Like, if you're going to show a marginalized character, they have to be perfect. They have to be a role model. They cannot have flaws. They can't be messy. They have to be likable. But in reality, that is not how people work. No one really is true or bad. We're all on a spectrum. We all have good days and bad days. We all make mistakes. We all have parts of ourselves we're not proud of. And trans women are definitely no exception. They're people. That's it. So when we see a character like Jax, who is deeply flawed, sometimes cruel, even the creator herself, by the way, actually admitted to that, deeply broken and struggling with their own identity, I don't think that's a bad representation. In fact, I would argue it could be more meaningful than a perfect sanitized version. Showing a trans character as complex, messy, and even unlikable can do more good than you might think. Because for someone who's trans and watching this, seeing a character who shares their identity and also their struggles, their anger, defensiveness, fear of being vulnerable, that can be incredibly validating. It says you're not alone in feeling this way. You can be messy and still worthy of love and understanding. And it also tells you need to change if you truly want happiness within yourself. And that's also very important. Even I related to Jax's mask, the persona you put on to protect yourself. Everyone does that to an extent. So I can only imagine how powerful that must feel for someone who is trans and sees their own experience reflected in that struggle. The way Jax pushes people away before they can get too close, and the way he hides behind his sarcasm and cruelty, the way he's terrified of being seen who he really is. That's universal, and that's what makes a good representation. Not perfection, but truth. And I also have to talk about the Isn't She Lovely song right at the end, which was a powerful moment in the finale. Isn't She Lovely by Stevie Wonder was written for his daughter, Aisha, celebrating her birth. It's a song about love, joy, and seeing someone beautiful and precious. In the finale, this song plays during Jax's final sequence, the montage right at the end. And I believe that this is a reference to Jax's true self, the person she is behind all this mask, all the cruelty, all the fear, the person who was always there, but never got to fully exist. It's a mini reference that lands so hard if you're paying attention, and it's one of those details that makes the trans reading feel intentional, even if the rest of the episode didn't set it up as well as it could have. And also, something that I do want to add here, just as I'm reflecting based on the whole series, even though I also agree that Jax's abstraction felt very off, I think that was intentional. As the creator said herself on Blue Space, that is a direct reference to suicide. Jax killed herself. And I think that it was powerful to make it so abrupt, because suicide most of the times is exactly like that. Fast, abrupt, and many people cannot even see it. And I do think that Ghostwork made that intentionally to reflect that. And when you put it in this perspective, I think it's more powerful than you might think. And that brings us to the final point of the video, the thing I really want you to leave with. Art is up to interpretation. And Ghostwork herself said this. She's talked about how art can mean different things to different people. And that's not a bug, it's a feature. And that's the whole point. Whether you see Jax as trans, as a metaphor for masculine and mental health, as a critique to toxic masculinity, or as all the above, you're not wrong. The beauty of art is that it can hold multiple meanings at once. And it can mean one thing to the creator and something completely different to the audience. And both those interpretations can coexist. And here's my final message to you all. Take the finale, the creator's comments, the fan theories, take this whole video in fact. What matters is what the story means to you. If Jax's journey resonated with you, whether you're trans, questioning, or someone who's ever worn a mask to hide who you really are, that's valid, that's real, and that's the power of art. The Amazing Digital Circus is over now. But that is just the beginning. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.